Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. Sorry to have a podcast yesterday. I had some things come up. I'll try to make it up down the line, but so my apologies. Life, things happen. You can't always get to everything you need to do, but I'll try to make it up down the line. So today I wanted to talk about Kyle Kulinski again. I know I haven't taken enough heat, I guess, from the last couple of podcasts I've done about him. But he made an ass of himself again, so I have to talk about it because his fans are so deluded about how bad he's become. I just think it needs to be pointed out. But before I get to that, please remember to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can get your podcasts. It's available. So please subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. So, as you know, if you follow politics to any degree, Trump was able to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Iran with some help from other countries like Qatar, for sure. But it was largely done by Trump. Trump wanted this war to end. To his credit, and I was a little nervous, no doubt about it, when Trump was, tweeting or truthing about regime change. I think this past, what was it, Sunday. I was getting a little nervous. I was like, Donnie, what are you talking about? We're not for regime change. This isn't I didn't think you're not Donald W. Trump. You're Donald J. Trump. We don't need any more regime change wars in the Middle East. So, look, I was a little nervous too about the whole Iran strikes, but luckily, and I guess the White House was correct that we should have trusted Trump because Trump just wanted to strike, you know, these nuclear facilities. And then he was done. He didn't want to get us bogged down into a nuclear, not a nuclear, but didn't want to get us bogged down in a war for regime change and have boots on the ground. And so that was very good. But, Kulinski, when the news first broke out that there was a ceasefire, he immediately did this whole video with his wife, Crystal, in it as well, talking about how the ceasefire was basically fake and that Iran hadn't actually agreed to a ceasefire and that this was just a trick for Trump to try to, take credit, essentially. And it basically to allow to make an excuse for Israel to continue by, saying Iran agreed to a ceasefire, even though, according to Kyle, they hadn't. So when Iran struck, that would give Israel more of a justification to continue the war. Well, that was wrong. The ceasefire was real, and Iran did agree to the ceasefire. Now, to be fair to Kyle, because I'm a fair man, to be fair to Kyle, there was some contradictory reports right when Trump, posted the news on Truth Social of the original ceasefire. There were some, I think, in Reuters there was a report that from an Iranian official saying that they had not agreed to a ceasefire. So, having level of skepticism at the very beginning was not inherently unreasonable, but he from the jump called the ceasefire bullshit and that it wasn't going to hold and it probably wasn't real because Iran wasn't recognizing it. And it's like I can understand the skepticism, but you have to wait. You don't publicly just because you hate Trump so much, you can't just say, "Oh, that's bullshit." You can't do that. You have to wait. These things can take time for both sides to acknowledge because they want to keep their guard up till the last second. That's what you do in war. You're not going to acknowledge a ceasefire until, it's 100% certain and everything is kosher, no pun intended. And, the fact that Kulinski would come out immediately and say the ceasefire is bullshit, Trump's lying, it just shows again how partisan he is. He couldn't, it just didn't make sense to him that Trump would try to broker a peace deal. Because Kulinski has always been unfair to Trump when it comes to war. Not that he doesn't sometimes have legitimate criticisms of Trump when it comes to war. I agreed with his overall, critique of Trump bombing the Iranian, nuclear sites. I don't think Trump should have done that. And it ended up working out, I think, actually pretty well. But I thought the risk was too high to do it. So I actually agreed with Kulinski on that point. But overall, if you look at Trump's first term, Kulinski's never acknowledged the fact that Trump was the least interventionist, least pro-war president that we had had in decades. He's almost always tries to ignore or never acknowledge the fact that Trump in his first term at least, was the first president in decades to go through a full presidential term without starting a new war. Kulinski's never acknowledged that. He hates, whenever someone brings up that point, he'll bring up, oh, Trump assassinated Soleimani, this Iranian general during Trump's first term. And it's like, yeah, Trump did that, but it did not escalate into an actual war. I mean, that's the reality. It was kind of similar to what happened here. Once we assassinated Soleimani, Iran did you know, they did sort of a fake strike in retaliation. It was more symbolic than anything. That's what they did this time as well. So, Kulinski, he's never given Trump credit. I'm not, by the way, I say the least pro-war president. In a vacuum, if you're just grading Trump in a vacuum, yeah, his foreign policy was very hawkish in a lot of ways. No question about it. He did try to overthrow certain governments. He continued the bombings in Syria, Yemen, etc. He kept a lot of our troops in place. He started withdrawing in certain areas, but he never fully pulled out in some of these countries like Afghanistan. So I'm not saying Trump in a vacuum was anti-war necessarily, but you're grading him on a curve compared to his predecessors. Yeah, Trump was the least pro-war president we'd had in decades. It's not really a debate. And if you really want to argue that, you're just not being honest. Again, he got us into no new foreign conflicts during his first term. Now, if you want to say that's different because of this bombing in Iran, fine. It ended up not escalating into, a full-on war involving us. But if you want to say Trump's streak of not starting new wars is over, that's fine. I'm okay with that, because certainly the risk was there. And I don't think the strikes, even though it looks like it worked out, I don't think Trump should have done it. So I'm okay with that critique, but his first term, no question, he was the least pro-war president we had in decades. And Kulinski never acknowledges that. He just obsesses over the fact that Trump continued a bunch of foreign conflicts that Democrat presidents started, like Obama did in Syria and Yemen. And he continued Republican conflicts too with Iraq and Afghanistan, no question. But Trump was starting to pull out of Afghanistan. If he had won the 2020 election or hadn't been stolen, whatever you think, he probably would have pulled out. He would have done it much more competently than Joe Biden did, almost no question. I mean, Joe Biden, how could you be less competent than Joe Biden? I mean, the dude couldn't string two sentences together. Who can't be more competent than Joe Biden, right? But Kulinski's never given Trump the proper credit for that. And he talks about how, and then he says, oh, Trump should be impeached for these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities. And he also claims that they weren't successful. And he's basing this off a report by the same woman who reported the Hunter Biden laptop story originally, saying it was Russian disinformation. This reporter is now reporting that these strikes weren't that effective. And that's why Kulinski is saying that, these Iranian strikes were not effective. It didn't really destroy anything. They have other uranium, they're enriched uranium, that's only set them back maybe, a few months. And he's just taking the word of this journalist who pushed Russiagate during Trump's first term, and again, was the big pusher of the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. This woman just takes CIA talking points that are anti-Trump and just spews them out without any fact-checking. And this is why Kulinski thinks these strikes weren't even successful. I mean, again, he's just become a partisan hack. If he was responsible, he would, I don't even think I watched at least one video he did on it. He didn't even acknowledge the fact that these reports are coming largely from this one reporter who's not reliable. He doesn't even talk about the possibility, at least not in a way that he gives any credibility, the idea that the reason why there's these reports coming up, these strikes weren't that effective, is to try to get Trump suckered into the war again. And that that they're lying to try to force Trump's hand, Israel's lying to try to force Trump's hand to get him more deeply involved again. It's like, I understand, you shouldn't trust what the White House is saying on face value, obviously. Just because they're saying it's successful doesn't mean those strikes were successful. I understand that. But you can't just take leaks from the Pentagon or these other intelligence agencies at face value either, because they have a history of being very anti-Trump. Again, just look at his first term. Kulinski, I would hope, would at least acknowledge that, because he debunked Russiagate through most of Trump's first term. Again, because he was less partisan back then. So he should be aware of this, but he seems oblivious because, again, he's become a partisan hack for clicks, which, C'est la vie, I guess, but it's very disheartening. And now he's saying that Trump should be impeached. And he went on a big rant the other day because a bunch of Democrats voted not to impeach Trump. Because Al Green, I think the Texas congressman, the Democrat, who yelled at Trump during the State of the Union, put up articles of impeachment. It failed. And Kulinski was like losing his mind. And it's like, and he said one of the bases for impeachment should be, the illegal, what he claims are illegal strikes on Iran. And this is an interesting, conversation actually, whether or not those strikes were constitutional. I mean, for those who have any basic knowledge, what the Constitution says and the whole concept is that if you're a president and you want to go to war, you need congressional authority. And the argument here is that, well, what Trump did was an act of war, even if we're not in a war right now. Just the strikes on Iran was an act of war, and therefore it was illegal because he didn't get congressional approval. Now, that's not a crazy argument, to be fair. There is some merit to that argument. Now, the other thing that he doesn't talk about, Kulinski, is that there have been laws passed by Congress that actually does give the president to strike countries that are not without congressional approval. They're called AUMFs, and they were passed in 2001 and updated in 2002 after 9/11. And it basically gives presidents authority, more or less, to be able to do these strikes without having to go to Congress every single time. Now, again, just because Congress passed those laws doesn't actually mean they're constitutional either. In theory, Congress can delegate powers to another branch in an unconstitutional manner. So it is a concept. It's not meritless, the idea that the strikes were illegal. But did Kulinski ever call for Obama to be impeached when he did the same thing in Syria and Yemen? He didn't get congressional approval to do those bombings. Was Kulinski calling for Obama's impeachment back then? No, he wasn't. I've checked. He criticized Obama for it, but he never really called for his impeachment. There's no record of that. I may have missed it, to be fair. There's a lot of videos, and this is over 10 years ago. So I want to be fair. He maybe called for Obama's impeachment, and I just can't find it. And he was critical of Obama's Yemen and Syria bombings, but he never called for his impeachment, as far as I can tell, when Obama did those bombings without congressional approval. Again, this is just further evidence that he's a hack. When Trump does something he doesn't like, he goes ballistic. But in the past, when other presidents did the same thing, he didn't go ballistic. It just shows that he's become a partisan. Even Trump himself, if you compare Trump to the first term, he's just more of a hack than he was back then. I'm not trying to be, look, I used to like him. I'm not trying to be unfair. I used to be a fan of Kulinski. I'm just trying to get the message out to any people who are fans of him, and clearly he has a lot. Just look at some of the comments of the podcasts I've done on YouTube. You'll see. He has a lot of fans, and I'm just trying to get you guys to understand he's not the same guy he was 5-10 years ago. He's become much more partisan. He's just MSNBC on YouTube now. And if you like that, that's fine. If you like MSNBC on YouTube, that's fine. But they have a YouTube channel also. You can just watch their videos instead, frankly. But that's what Kulinski has become. I'm not trying to be unfair to the guy. I'm trying to express and show the problems with his rhetoric now. He's just become so partisan. And again, I'll also say, and you guys aren't going to like hearing this, is that this also proves I think Cenk was right. The fact that Trump got a ceasefire after all the public pressure from MAGA, including Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk to some degree, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Trump wasn't going to be convinced to not get us bogged down in a regime change war by liberals. Okay, they have no standing with them. The only reason I think Trump, at least one of the main reasons Trump ended up not going full in on regime change is because of the backlash he saw on his base. So this idea that Kyle and Crystal, when they were debating Cenk last week, this whole concept that, that there was no split in MAGA and that it's liberals that can really be a check on Trump. It's like, no, this whole Israel-Iran ceasefire just proves Cenk was right. Cenk's right. He was. If this is an example of Cenk's whole argument being proven correct, and you can't acknowledge that, you're just a hack. Which is why I think Kulinski has become a hack. So it's sort of this whole Israel-Iran ceasefire. It's very telling. It proves again that Kyle is a partisan hack. It proves that, Trump fundamentally is more anti-war than Kulinski ever wants to admit. And it also proves that Chank's right. He's right that you don't want to alienate MAGA because on issues where you agree, like not escalating war, you want them on your side because they actually do have some sway with Trump, unlike the left. So, anyway, I think that's it for today. Again, please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye bye.